United Auto Workers strike against America's big three automakers is now in its fourth day. Negotiators saying that they were reasonably productive discussions over the weekend, but an agreement appears nowhere in sight. CGTN's Hendrik Sabrandi reports.
In Detroit this past weekend, members of the United Auto Workers Union had a loud and clear message for their bosses. It was echoed by a prominent U.S. politician.
It is time for you to end your greed. It is time for you to treat your employees with the respect and dignity they deserve.
Time, they all said, to sit down and negotiate a fair contract. Existing deals for 146,000 workers at Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis car assembly plants expired last Thursday. With no new contracts, nearly 13,000 of them at 3 factories were ordered onto the picket lines in a targeted action.
These 3 units are being called to stand up and walk out on strike at midnight tonight.
The union is demanding a 36% pay increase over 4 years, roughly double what the companies are offering.
No deal! No deal!
Members are also calling for the end of wage tiers and better pension plans for new hires. Pretty reasonable, says President Biden.
Auto companies have seen record profits, including the last few years, because of the extraordinary skill and sacrifices of the UAW workers. Those record profits have not been shared fairly, in my view, with those workers.
Back in 2007, they gave up cost of living raises and made pension concessions to help car makers survive the Great Recession. Now they say it's time for payback, for companies to share some of their big profits. Some argue the COVID-19 pandemic also upset the status quo and convinced many workers they were being taken advantage of.
And when you are in the midst of a crisis where a lot of things that you took for granted have become unraveled, you also recognize that this is an opportunity to make changes, to move yourself forward.
A recent deal between Teamsters and UPS may also have sent a signal to the UAW that strikes pay off.
I think these workers feel that they now have as much bargaining power as they're ever going to have, and so that's why this strike is happening now.
Companies say union proposals are far too expensive, would make car makers less competitive with their non-union rivals, and that their hands can't be tied as they invest for an electric vehicle future. Workers say they're holding firm.
Now it's time. We need a contract. We need one that takes care of the new hires.
Well, I'm hoping it don't go too long, but if it do, we just gonna stand out here and fight.
It's a battle, one analyst says, that each side thinks is essential to their future. Can they find a middle ground somewhere down the road? Hendrik Sabrandi, CGTN, Detroit.
For more on the potential impact of this ongoing strike, we're joined by Marick Masters. Marick's a business professor at Wayne State University. Marick, thanks very much for coming on our program. I hope you had a chance to hear that very fine package by our correspondent, Hendrik Sabrandi. I'm curious how you see this strike. Is it different from previous ones? And the obvious question, how long do you think this could go on? Because the union seems very committed at this point.
Well, it's different from previous ones in, number one, the tactics that the unions are using, the UAW in this case, are unconventional. They're different from the company-wide approach they've taken, where they targeted a company and struck that one company company-wide. They've selected a few plants with the option of amping it up a bit if they need to. It's also different in the sense that the issues relating to electrification are new to the industry at such a critical point. We haven't seen them in such intensity before, and really we're at a pivotal moment in the industry and will determine the future of the role of labor and the auto workers in the auto industry.
When you talk about electrification, you're obviously talking about EV, the vehicles, which are really going to be the future, not only in the United States, but everywhere. How is that affecting union workers? Because everything I've read, everything that I've seen seems to indicate it would have less employees on the line, and that's obviously where people would be making those larger paychecks.
Well, it means fewer workers. It could result in the loss of about 1/3 of the jobs. It also means lower wages because the electrical workers that produce battery plants tend not to make as much as the workers covered under the union's master agreement. And also the companies have to finance electrification. The Detroit 3 are planning on investing about $120 billion between now and 2026. And that money has to come from somewhere, and that's money that can't go to more wages for workers.
We've also heard the term targeted strikes. Explain what that means. Which plants are on the picket line, and why do you think that is so important right now?
Well, they picked 3 assembly plants, one at each of the company in different locations in Missouri, in Ohio, and in Michigan. And they produce altogether about, over a 7-month period, of 416,000 vehicles. It's different in the sense that it gives the union more options. It's not a company-wide strike that would cripple the company. It is basically giving the companies some time to come forward with a better offer without the harmful effects being so severe. But the union is not going to wait too long before it involves more plants in the strike. And if they struck a couple of components plants, they could literally bring down the companies, most of their plants altogether.
You know, when you talk about the big 3 here in the United States, you have to think about the potential economic impact because they've been such a key linchpin. But the global impact is also out there as well. And to a degree, we heard Joe Biden in our story. Biden's reputation is part of this labor move. He considers himself the labor president, and maybe the leaders do, but in the rank and file people I've talked to the last 8 years, they like Trump.
Well, there's certainly a division within the rank and file, and there's a large segment of the rank and file that supports Trump. And that is going to be the case regardless of what happens in this strike. Trump has made an issue out of electrification in the Biden's policy favoring electrical vehicles and wants to roll that back. So it'll be an issue in the 2024 election. Biden has a lot on the line in this. If the strike were to go on and cripple the economy, as company-wide strikes would do, they could cost a strike across all 3 companies could result in the loss of over 1 million jobs if the strike lasted longer than 8 weeks. And it could cost, several $1 billion, up to $7 billion in lost personal income and business income. So you're looking at severe consequences. Biden is going to intervene before that's allowed to happen. I have no doubt about it. And he'll try to get the parties together to reach a settlement. Whether he's successful or not, I don't know. Right now, what I hear, they're telling him, don't get involved.
Interesting. We heard also that there were somewhat positive discussions over the weekend. What that means, no one knows. But how far apart do you believe the workers and management are at this point? And we talked about EV being some of the biggest hurdles, but when you see, for example, massive benefits from other entities that have gone on strike, I believe that UPS got some 40% pay hike, something like that. Even their lowest workers now make more than $22 an hour. Clearly, the UAW has this in their crosshairs.
Well, they do, and it's going to take a lot of money. It's going to take a very large wage increase to get a settlement. There's no doubt about that. Whether or not there is a settlement in the near future depends on how insistent the union is in getting all of its demands. Its demands fall into 2 buckets. One, basically those involving increasing wages and doing something to get people at a higher pay grade sooner rather than later. The other includes those things the union wants to get back that it gave away in the bankruptcy era, and retiree health care, defined benefit pension plans. Those are non-starters with the companies. If the union's going to insist on those things, and a shortened work week and the restoration of cost of living allowances, then this strike's going to last for a long time.
A lot at stake right now. Marick Masters, we can't thank you enough for your insight. I certainly appreciate it.